Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Okay, we're actually going to do the class. We're going to read from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And you wanted to know about love. And we're going to find out about love as is explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is also quoting much from the Nectar of Devotion. Okay, is that all right? Now, I warned you that if the class that talks about love of Krishna, you may not understand a lot. I'm going to try to simplify it. But you also may get quite bored. It's very technical. And what it's going to do, I mean, if you don't understand everything, at least it will help you understand Prabhupada's statement that there's no love in the material world. And we had talked about that a lot. And we explained that Prabhupada was defining love as it's defined, as we're going to define it here, and you're going to know more about what Prabhupada meant by saying there's no love in the material world, as you see the kind of love the devotee has for Krishna. And what will become evident that love for Krishna awakens in higher stages of devotional service. And in those higher stages of devotional service, it awakens because the devotee is free from material desire. So that helps us understand that love means for love to manifest in Krishna consciousness, there has to be purity of the heart. Whereas love, as we know it in the material world, it exists, or you could say oftentimes it's fueled by selfishness. I love you because I need you. I love you because you make me happy. Or I love you because I'm attached to you, and I'm attached to you because you give me enjoyment. So it's the opposite in love of Krishna. It's not, the love only comes when one is free from that desire. So it's much different. Okay, so having said that, given an introduction, just so you don't get too confused or too bored, I wanted to say that you will get confused and bored a little bit. And that's okay if you don't understand everything. Just try to, as Prabhupada said, read it even if you don't understand it. So that's what we'll do, but I will explain it. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, "Now hear, O Sanatan, about the result of devotional service, which is love of Godhead, life's ultimate goal. One who hears this description will be enlightened in the transcendental mellows of devotional service." So now, Prabhupada's Mahaprabhu is talking to Sanatana Goswami. And there are three stages of devotional service. One is the connection, it's called Sambandha. One is Abhideya, which is the practice. And Prayojana is the goal. So now Lord Chaitanya says, so now we'll hear about the Prayojana, the goal, which is love. And the first thing I think we should understand before we begin this discussion is that you really have to drop your conception of love when you hear this, because it's not like love in the material world. Although we say that lust is a perverted reflection of love. So there are symptoms of love that we can relate to, but as you go more and more into this, you see that the intensity of love that is there for Krishna and the purity of love is unlike anything in the material world. When devotional service is executed on the transcendental platform of pure goodness, it is like a sun ray of love for Krishna. At such a time, devotional service causes the heart to be softened by various tastes. And when one is then and one is then situated in bhava, emotion. So bhava is a Sanskrit word which means emotion, and bhava is the preliminary stage of love of God. And here, we're talking about the heart being softened. So we have this idea in the second canto of the heart is like steel. Interesting, Bhagavatam talks about steel, so I guess they were making steel in those days. Anyway, Bhagavatam talks about a hard heart as the materialistic heart, and a soft heart as a heart which melts in emotion in contact with Krishna consciousness. So just like we know sometimes we'll engage in devotional service and we kind of feel our heart is hard. We feel like we're hearing about Krishna, but maybe there's not a lot of emotion or attraction, or not a lot of anything, or we're chanting and not a lot of anything's happening. That's because the heart is hard. The heart is hard. The heart is hard, both, yeah. So I think we can kind of relate to that to some degree, that our heart is hard. And so when the heart is softened, then emotion for Krishna awakens. And that's a much, much higher stage than we're at presently. But even though that's a very high state, sometimes in our state we get a little inkling, a little drop. And so sometimes we experience a little emotion, temporarily, something, as the heart softens. And so how we define softening of the heart, how we define hard heart. You could say hard heart is contaminated, it's materialistic, self-centered, and soft heart is a heart which melts in association of Krishna and his devotees. So that there's emotion. Okay? Anyway, the above verse is from the Nectar of Devotion. Bhava, emotion, has two different symptoms, constitutional and marginal. Now, my dear Sanatan, listen to the symptoms of love. So bhava is the stage in which devotees will experience ecstatic symptoms, like they might cry, their hairs may stand on end, they may roll on the ground. And just like sometimes when there's great emotion, people faint, and just how the mind can affect the body. So when there's intense emotion for Krishna, and then it interacts with different parts of the body, because the body's made of earth, fire, air, ether, water. So if it interacts with ether, there'll be a certain kind of maybe belching. With water, there'll be crying. The different ecstatic symptoms will interact because of the intense emotions, and they'll exhibit themselves physically. And so unless the emotions are intense, there won't be these ecstatic symptoms. And that's preliminary stage of what is called prema. Prema is pure love. In the stage of bhava, there's some impurity left, some minute impurity, some reluctance to fully surrender to Krishna, some contamination, slight contamination of false ego. Purport. The word Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma means situated on the transcendental platform of pure goodness. In this way, the soul is purified of all material contamination, and this position is called Sarup Lakshana, the constitutional symptom of bhava, emotion. By various tastes, one's heart is softened, and there is an awakening of one's loving propensity to render spontaneous service to the Lord. This is called Tatashta Lakshana, the marginal symptoms of bhava. So there's a letter in which Prabhupada explains that if we go on with devotional service, just continue following, even sometimes mechanically, if we can't follow out of any kind of taste or natural desire, if we continue following, then Prabhupada said, eventually it will come to spontaneous, and that is the goal of Krishna consciousness, to come to spontaneous love. So spontaneous love is what it sounds like. It's love of Krishna that's natural. It's not forced by any rules and regulations, but it's done out of natural attraction. And that's the goal. And Prabhupada said when you achieve that goal, then you've reached perfection. So all the work we're doing now, Bodhisadhana, following rules and regulations, even mechanically, is meant to bring us to the stage of love, which is spontaneous, natural attraction for Krishna. And then when we reach that stage, then that's our perfection. So it's not that the goal is to be a perfectly execute rules and regulations. The goal is to be spontaneously engaged in serving Krishna. And that comes as a byproduct of doing sadhana bhakti. So that's the idea. So this stage of bhava, it's a natural progression, and this progression will be discussed later in this chapter. When that bhava softens the heart completely, this is we're reading from Madhya Lila 23, if you want to follow, this is verse 7. Madhya 23, verse 7. When that bhava softens the heart completely, becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness in relation to the Lord, and becomes very much condensed and intensified, it's called prema. So, prema, love of Godhead, by learned scholars. So, what this means is, as bhava bhava happens when the heart is softened, and the heart is softened further, then it is said, and what happens is the devotee feels that Krishna is mine. That's a symptom of love. Krishna is mine, possessiveness. That's a very dominant form of consciousness that happens when you have love of Krishna. You feel Krishna is mine, I own him. And that emotion, here it said, when it's condensed and intensified, it becomes love. So an interesting understanding is that when you begin devotional service, this bhava is in a seed form. And then as you grow in devotional service, the bhava grows. And when the bhava grows enough, it becomes love. Because here it's saying that bhava means the stage where that emotion is constant. So as we're growing into bhava, the emotion is not constant, but it's growing. It's growing, it's growing. And at some point, it grows to the point that it's constant. You always feel this emotion. But even in the beginning stages of devotional service, that bhava is there in this seedling form. And as we're advancing, then we are developing this bhava. When it's fully manifest, it's the stage of bhava. And when that bhava condenses and softens, what does it say here? Softens and condensed and intensifies, it becomes prema. And prema then has different divisions, but you enter that level of prema in which there is no trace of material contamination. It's finished. So even on the stage of bhava, even though it's a high stage, there's still some impurity. If you have any questions, just ask. And if you don't understand, as I said, it's okay, because what we're trying to understand from this description, or part of what we're trying to understand, is how different love of Krishna is from love in the material world, or what we call love. It's quite different. So we don't mistake ordinary love and love of Krishna to be the same. This is text 8. When one develops an unflinching sense of ownership or possessiveness in relation to Lord Vishnu, or in other words, when one thinks Vishnu and no one else to be the only object of love, such an awakening is called bhakti, by exalted persons like Bhishma, Prahlad, Uddhava, and Narada. So here, this definition is clarified, the definition of possessiveness, what it means to feel possessiveness. Here in this verse it says, an unflinching sense of ownership. Then what does that mean? No one else is the object of love. Only Krishna is the object of love. That means there's no attraction for anything but Krishna. If Krishna is the only object of love, obviously you don't love anything else. So that's the definition of possessiveness here. An unflinching sense of ownership. That only Krishna is the object of love. Of course, it doesn't mean you don't love anyone else, but it means that the love will be a byproduct of your love for Krishna. It won't be independent. You won't love people independently of your love for Krishna. And in fact, our Shastra says that you can't actually love people unless it's a byproduct of your love for Krishna, because everything, every aspect of love, or even aspects of jealousy and envy, they all first manifest in our relationship with Krishna, and then they manifest in relationship with others. So for example, if I'm envious of you, it means that I still have envy of Krishna. I can't just be envious of you and not be envious of Krishna. So it doesn't work that way. As hard as that may be to digest, that's the understanding. And in the same way, I can't love anyone unless I love Krishna. It won't really be love. It won't manifest as love. When there's love of Krishna, naturally love for all living beings comes. And if I think I'm loving others, unless it's in relation to Krishna, then it's going to be in relation to me, what makes me happy. Then I'll call that love, what satisfies my needs. And if I'm loving in relation to Krishna, that means I'm loving the devotees in relation to devotional service. If I like you and you make me feel good and I say I love you because I like you, that is because I like you. That's all it is. What does that have to do with Krishna? But if I love you because you're a devotee and you help me in my Krishna consciousness and my affection for you is in relation to Krishna, that's different. Okay, so we go to text 9. If by good fortune a living entity develops faith in Krishna, he begins to associate with devotees. Okay, so Rupa Goswami in the Nectar Devotion has given a step-by-step, you could say ladder, or system by which one becomes a devotee, and that's being described here. And not by how one becomes a devotee, how one, yes, becomes a devotee, and then how one advances in Krishna consciousness. So that's being described here. Some of you may know that verse, Ado Shada. It begins with Shada, Tata, Sadhu Sangha, then there's association of devotees. Then Tata Bhajana Kriya. Bhajana Kriya means practice of Krishna consciousness. Then Anartha Nivritti, which means purification of unwanted desires. Then Nishta means steadiness. Asakti, which means attachment. Then you come to Bhava, which means ecstasy or emotion, and then Prema. So it's charting out the progress. First there's faith. From faith you associate with devotees. By associating you want to practice Krishna consciousness. By practicing you become purified. When you're purified, you become steady, because most of your anarthas are what's causing you to be unsteady. When most of the anarthas are gone, you're steady. From that, then comes ruchi. Excuse me, we missed that thing. Ruchi means taste. Then you'll have some taste. From taste, there'll be attachment. So taste is when you're doing things because you like doing it. It's relishable. Then attachment begins, that's the first stage of love, when you become attached to Krishna. Then bhava, when the emotion develops. Then prema, when it's pure. So that's being described here. Just so you know, as we're reading the verses, you'll see this sequence. If by good fortune a living entity develops faith in Krishna, he begins to associate with devotees. So those are the first two stages. The first stage is Shraddha, which means faith, but Prabhupada said it also means appreciation. So Prabhupada said that the first stage of beginning Krishna consciousness is if somebody says, devotees are good, I like devotees. He said that's also Shraddha. Any kind of appreciation for devotees is the beginning of Krishna consciousness. So if you ever meet someone, or you do anything to present Krishna consciousness, and people say, yes, I like this is good, or devotees are good, I like what you're doing, that's the beginning of their devotional service, or that's the first step. So, Shraddha, I have some faith, or some trust, or some appreciation for the devotees. Then, the reason that's the first stage is because often, if you have appreciation for devotees, then you're going to want to associate with them. I like these people, I like what they're doing. In many cases, you might think these are the kinds of people I want to be associated with. My friends are not like this. I want to be associated with people like this. So from Shraddha, a little faith in what devotees are and what they teach, a little appreciation of the devotees, then there will be that desire to be with them. So then people start coming to programs, coming to temples, retreats, whatever, where there's devotees. So that's the second stage, which is sadhu sangha. So this verse describes both stages, Shraddha. When one Shraddha and Sadhusanga, when one is encouraged in devotional service by the association of devotees, one becomes free from all unwanted contamination by following the regular principles in chanting and hearing. So this is taking us through 3 stages actually. So you have faith, then you associate, and then by association you want to do what the devotees are doing. That's natural. You want to adopt some of the practices, some of the lifestyle. So that's called bhajana kriya. Bhajana kriya is when you take up the practice. Bhajan means to worship, kriya means activity. So it's basically bhajana kriya means sadhana. You begin chanting rounds regularly, starting to follow principles. That's bhajana kriya. And technically, if you want to be more technical, bhajana kriya means initiation, means you're actually strictly following. But there's a line between bhajana kriya and the next stage, because sometimes Prabhupada described the next stage as anartha nivritti, that the result of bhajana kriya is that you can follow the regular principles steadily. So anyway, bhajana kriya is you take up the practice, then the next stage is described here. Becomes free from all unwanted contamination. So by practicing devotional service, you come to the next stage, which is called anartha nivritti. Anartha means unwanted desire, or unwanted contamination, and nivritti means the end. Now in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada describes that on this stage of anartha nivritti, you're not completely purified, but you're about 75% purified. And so you're not really attracted to breaking regular principles. You're well over the threshold of following Krishna consciousness. And on this stage what happens is that even though you have material desires, they don't really affect you. So Prabhupada's saying 75% purified, but that other 25% doesn't have a lot of energy to it. So, yeah, that's the idea. You're anartha nivritti. You're practicing Krishna consciousness, and the big anarthas, greed, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, you're overcoming them, and other material desires may still be there, but they've lost the power to influence your life. So then the next stage is nishtha. When your material desires, when you've overcome most of them, and the ones that remain lose their power, then you become nishtha. Nishtha means steady. We're unsteady because of material desires. They're pulling us. I want this, I want that. So it's difficult to be steady. When you're free of material desires, then there's nothing to pull you away from Krishna, right? That's the idea. You're not being pulled away by the flickering mind and flickering desire, so that's called nishtha. So the point of this discussion here is that when you begin devotional service, if you take up bhajana kriya and you do it properly, then you'll come to this stage of anartha nivritti, the reduction of material contamination, of unwanted desires, and then nishtha, steadiness. That's what that verse is talking about. When one is free from all unwanted contamination, he advances with firm faith. So that's the stage of nishtha. When firm faith and devotional service awakens, the taste for hearing and chanting also awakens. So this is really interesting to consider. Firm faith awakens after anartha nivritti. Anartha nivritti means freedom from material desire. Then here it says, after freedom from material desire, taste awakens. So it's making, if you look at it as I'm looking at it, then taste for material desire means you won't have taste for Krishna consciousness. And freedom from material desire means you will have taste for Krishna consciousness. So it's a kind of a paradox that we're trying to taste the pleasure of material enjoyment. But what this verse is saying, that as long as you desire to taste the pleasure of material enjoyment, you won't get to the stage of ruchi. Ruchi was just spiritual taste. And actually that's the stage we want to get to, just like we're chanting our rounds. And a lot of times when we're chanting, we think, I wish I had a taste. Isn't it? I wish I had a taste for chanting. Well, taste is the stage. Now you can get a taste for chanting even if you're not on the stage. Stage of ruchi means you'll always have a taste. But the significant point here is that that taste comes when there's freedom from material desire. And material desire, in its own perverted way, is offering us taste, or taste means pleasure, or enjoyment, or happiness. That's what it offers. But here we're learning that unless you give it up, you won't actually taste spiritual pleasure. So there's this paradox that in trying to get pleasure, you don't get it, and in giving up pleasure, you do get it. Because here this verse is saying, after Anartha Nivritti, which means you're giving up material desire, that's when you get the pleasure of Krishna consciousness. Right? Isn't that what it's saying? Yes? No? I'm going to move over. We'll get a better... Yeah, is that better? Just get the whiteboard behind me. Yeah. You understand? Like, I want to enjoy this material world, but as long as I want to, then that desire to enjoy matter is preventing me from going to a higher stage in Krishna consciousness. So once I reach this higher stage, I hit a point where I get ruchi, taste. And you can see that in devotees who are advancing. That they hit a certain point. You can see they love to chant, they love to hear Bhagavatam, they love to do devotional service. That means they're either in the stage of ruchi or they're coming very near to it. They can go on talking about Krishna. Actually, that's all they want to talk about. And you'll see in the position of neophyte devotees, they'll talk about so many things. It's because the taste hasn't awakened. But the more you awaken Krishna consciousness, then the less attractive are other things. It's just the way it is. And naturally, if other things are less attractive, you're not interested in talking about them. So, if we want to get the highest possible taste we can get, we have to give up lower taste. We have to give up the desire to get anything that's not in relation to Krishna. Sita Lila, I can't read the whole thing. It ends, so you say, we have heard devotees say that we fell down from Goloka. Does that mean we were? And then it ends there. Let's see if you've gone on for yeah. Does that mean we were with Krishna? I always get asked this question. Anyway, I'll wait for you to say. Does that mean we were in prema once and fell down from that? I don't want to answer that question. I might get kicked out of ISKCON if I answer that. Let's just say, Prabhupada said, when you go back to Krishna Loka, you won't come back down. The reason it's so difficult to answer this question is because in different aspects, and even different devotees in ISKCON will answer this in different ways. So, let's just say we turned our back on Krishna. And one way of answering this is you can't turn your back on Krishna if you have prema. So if you did have prema, when you turned your back on Krishna, you didn't. Or others will say, you never did. And others will say, you had the opportunity to, but you didn't. It's hard to make sense of this. If we say we had love of Krishna, we gave it up. But Prabhupada does say we have choice, we always have choice to leave Krishna. Anyway, that choice is there. But we are reviving a relationship. Let's leave it at that. We're reviving our relationship. I can't answer this question because there's so many answers to this question. And if I don't give the right answer, the GBC will remove me from ISKCON. So normally I answer this question by saying we've turned our back on Krishna. Whether we were with Krishna or we're not with Krishna. When we turned our back, we turned our back, unfortunately. And some people will say, when you have prema, you can't fall from prema. You can fall from bhava, but you can't fall from prema. And if you can fall from bhava, it means you wouldn't be, and you can't fall from prema, it means you wouldn't be in the spiritual world, because that's where prema exists. It would only mean you could be in the material world. So some will say, you could be in the material world in Krishna Lila, but that's bhava. But once you reach prema, you won't fall. That's let's say, a philosophical answer. You fall from bhava, but not from prema. Because prema is pure. Bhava, we see Maharaj Bharat fell from bhava. So bhava is impure, but prema you don't fall from. Anyway. I know that doesn't satisfy you, but that's the best you're going to get right now. Maybe you're more confused than ever. That's why I don't like answering that question. I could confuse you more. So now we're at the stage of ruchi, which is taste, and then what comes after that? After a taste awakens, a deep attachment arises. That's called asakti. And from that attachment, the seed of love for Krishna grows in the heart. So it's stated here that the seed of love for Krishna begins at this stage. So ruchi, the attachment, is not that strong. It's not that there is no attachment, and it's not that before the stage of ruchi there's no ruchi, there's no taste, and it's not before the taste of anartha nivritti that there's no giving up of material desire. But when you reach that stage, it's a plateau. So when I reach a stage of ruchi, it's a plateau, which means that's where taste is constant. And when I reach a stage of nistha or anartha nivritti, that's where the steadiness comes. It's constant. Before that, I may be giving up material desire, but I may not be steady. The desires may come and go. So now it's saying when you get to the stage of rati, which means attachment, deep attachment develops. So it doesn't mean at ruchi there is no attachment. It just means now it's deep. It means it's always there, and that's the beginning stage, the preliminary or seed of love of God. So as we said, love is prema. So now we're 2 stages away from prema. It's a very high stage of purity. Because in order to start to become attached to Krishna, obviously your senses have to be purified. Very, very purified. Your consciousness has to be very, very pure. Because if our consciousness isn't pure, Krishna won't appear attractive to us. Because Krishna is the purest of the pure, he's transcendental, and unless our consciousness is pure or transcendental, how we're going to be attracted to Krishna? So it's so the point is that this taste and now attachment, they all come after anartha nivritti, after the cessation of material desires. So as I was beginning to say, that love in the Krishna conscious sense is love which is selfless. That's what it means. There's a focus totally on engaging and serving this other person, and there's no personal interest. Whereas love in the material world, it's full of personal interest. And if you see all the, there's many books on marriage. And in some of the books, one of the things they'll talk about is needs. You have to express your needs to your partner. But the needs of the gopis, their only need, or the needs of Krishna's devotees, are not personal. There's no personal need. That's not what love is without that personal need. There may be needs, but they're not personal. Needs to fulfill one's love in relation to Krishna. That may be there. Not may be, that will be there. So you can see material love is, you didn't give me that, and this is not good for our relationship. I need this, and you need to know what I need, and you need to be able to give me that. So in pure love, you don't have to say that, because you don't have those needs to fulfill. Plus, your lover is fulfilling you in a much greater way. if your partner is fulfilling you with love of Krishna, then you wouldn't have all these other needs, you would be happy. So Krishna can fulfill us, and just by seeing him, we're so fulfilled. So anyway, now we're at the stage of rati, which is attachment, and rati is the beginning. This is where the seed of love of Godhead begins. And this is, okay, now we have this taste for hearing and chanting. We like to hear and chant, we like to serve. And then as it intensifies, then we actually start becoming attached to Krishna. Just like formerly we are attached to things of this world. Different people, we might be attached to animals, cars, homes. Now we become attached to Krishna. And attached means that I can't live without. When you're attached to something, you really can't live without it. So that's good. So as I said, as you go on in devotional service, these higher stages begin to manifest in lower stages. So we're all a little bit attached to Krishna. It's hard for us to go on. It's hard for us to go on in Krishna consciousness if we're not a little attached to Krishna. But at the stage of attachment, it's fully manifest. It's a stage, that's where it's complete. When you hit that stage, it's complete. So whatever attachment we have for Krishna now becomes complete in that stage. Does that make sense? It's full attachment. I'm attached to Krishna. If I'm attached to Krishna, that means I'm not attached to anything else. Right? Can the love of the spiritual world be compared to a mother's love for a child? Yes and no. If you want a material comparison, yes. If you want something that equates to it exactly, no. Mother's love for her child is a bit biological, because you see that in animals. Animals, they have intense affection for their children. But Prabhupada did say that's the closest thing, or that's the best analogy we can get. Because so often a mother will sacrifice everything for a child. The love is so pure. They just want to give the child selflessly. So that's the idea, that it's selfless. But in terms of intensity, in terms of the nature of love, no. The nature, because how can love for a child be similar to love for Krishna? Because the child is not Krishna. The child is not transcendentally blissful, full of knowledge, eternal, and all attractive, full of all opulences. So in that sense it can be. But in the sense of selflessness, then that's the analogy, that it's like a mother. Mother's love for her child. Okay. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. When that ecstatic emotional stage intensifies. Okay, wait, I think we got to Bhava in the last verse. After a taste is awakened, deep attachment arises, and from that attachment, the seed of love grows in the heart. Oh, okay. So I was mistaken. The seed of love that grows in the heart is the stage of bhava. It's not the stage of attachment. I read it wrong, because the next verse describes prema. When ecstatic emotion intensifies, it's called love of God. Okay, so let's go back over this again. From taste awakens attachment. From attachment awakens emotion. That's what this verse is. This verse is describing 3 stages. Let's see, I'm reading the Bengali. Deep prasakti from attachment, heart appears. Priti ankur, the seed of affection. So the priti ankur, the seed of affection, that's actually bhava. So bhava is actually the preliminary stage of love of God, not asakti or attachment. I always knew that, but then I was explaining what I thought this verse was explaining, and I misread it. So, from attachment, then when attachment intensifies, there'll be emotion. So we were speaking earlier about emotion. Emotion is just a very, when we talk about emotion here, we're talking about intense emotion, not just feeling. Like a kind of emotion that could make you go crazy. Kind of emotion that can make your body do crazy things. Kind of emotion that could make you look a bit mad. Or just, it's very intense. So it's saying when that attachment intensifies, then, because Krishna is so attractive, then all these emotions develop. Sometimes they're hard to handle. Okay, and so then the next verse takes us to love of Godhead. When that ecstatic emotional stage intensifies, and it's called love of Godhead, such love is life's ultimate goal and the reservoir of all pleasure. So now there's a purport here, and we can discuss this purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, well, let me just, when that ecstatic emotional stage intensifies, it's called love of God. Such love is the ultimate goal. So love of Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. Bhava is the preliminary stage. When it's intensified and purified, it becomes love. Someone asked us recently, can you show a modern day example of love of Krishna? Of someone in ISKCON who has attained bhava or prema? Well, I would say there's a lot of examples of ruchi, but the saying is it takes one to know one. What Jiva Goswami explained is you can fake the symptoms, but you can't fake the consciousness. Like I could roll on the ground. Gauranga! Yeah, sometimes Jayapataka Maharaj would. I've seen him exhibit some ecstatic symptoms. But the thing is, real devotees, they don't exhibit them. It's not part of the culture to exhibit ecstatic symptoms. It's part of the culture to appear like an ordinary person. So even if someone has bhava, at least externally they're not going to exhibit it. So generally what you'll see is ruchi and asakti. You'll see the strong attachment and taste. There are many devotees who are very attached to Krishna and have very strong taste. But as far as external symptoms of bhava, we're instructed not to exhibit them. There's a story that Gaura Govinda Maharaj was once very ill. He'd gone to Mayapur and nobody knew what was wrong with him, and he went to the doctor, and then the doctor said he's not sick, he's experiencing bhava. Interesting, isn't it? It became somewhat uncontrollable for him. And Prabhupada sometimes would exhibit, but only on rare occasions. He would prevent himself from exhibiting these intense emotions. So just like we have intense emotions where we cry, or we laugh, or we sing, being stimulated by something material. And so when those emotions are stimulated by something Krishna conscious, they're just so much more intense. And sometimes for a devotee it's hard to control. Now, you could say you see a lot of those emotions in kirtan. Those devotees are ecstatically dancing and chanting, right? So one answer is say yes, just go to kirtan. Go to kirtan and you'll see bhava manifesting. At least while the kirtan's going on, the bhava is there. Because that's the gift of Lord Chaitanya, that we experience some of that ecstasy. Yes? You agree? I think so. I agree. Prabhupada said it also. So the mercy of Lord Chaitanya is that sometimes you experience ecstasy even when you're not on the stage of ecstasy. But as I said earlier, I think taste and attachment is quite visible in advanced devotees. They're just, their whole life is engaged in spreading Krishna consciousness and studying and teaching. They have such a taste for that, and chanting more than 16 rounds. Many devotees chant more than 16. If anyone who's chanting more than 16 has got some ruchi, right? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes this growth of love of Godhead as a gradual process. So here he's going to explain what we've been explaining, so it should be easy for you to understand now. A person becomes interested in devotional service by some good fortune, that's Shraddha. Eventually he becomes interested in pure devotional service without material contamination. At that point a person wants to associate with devotees, sadhu sangha. As a result of this association, he becomes more and more interested in discharging devotional service and hearing and chanting. That's bhajana kriya. The more one is interested in hearing and chanting, the more he is purified. That's anartha nivritti and nishta. Liberation from material contamination is called anartha nivritti, indicating a diminishing of all unwanted things. This is the test of development in devotional service. If one actually develops the devotional attitude, he must be free from the material contamination of illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. So if you're progressing in Krishna consciousness, then you come to this point. The anartha nivritti means that you're steady in following the four regular principles, because those are the pillars of material life. Those are the pillars of sinful activity, and if you're steady following those, then you'll be steady with your other material desires, because those are where you can say material desires condense in those forms. If one actually develops the devotional attitude, he must be free from the material contamination of illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. These are the preliminary symptoms. When one is freed from all material contamination, his firm faith in devotional service awakens. So it's just a little higher stage of purification. It's that stage where he's not being moved by material desire. When firm faith develops, a taste arises, and by that taste one becomes attached to devotional service. When this attachment intensifies, the seed of love of Krishna fructifies. So that's in the verse before. So from a sakti attachment, the seed develops, which is bhava. The position is called priti or raga. When the seed of love of God fructifies. This position is called priti or rati, affection, or bhava, emotion. So here, so priti, rati, or bhava. Priti and rati. Here, priti or rati is also synonymous with bhava. When rati intensifies, it's called love of Godhead. So intensification of bhava, the last seeds of impurities, last grains of impurities are removed. Then it's called love of Krishna. The love of Godhead is actually life's highest perfection and the reservoir of all pleasure. So we exist in this material world. Our purpose is to develop love of Krishna, and this love of Krishna is called prema. And so here in a general way it's being described, and as this chapter goes on, then it'll become more specific. Well, what are the various stages within love? Because we've just described here the various stages to love, but we haven't described the stages in love. And as you describe the stages in love, then you'll understand how this love is so much different than material love. Thus, devotional service, devotional life is divided into two stages, sadhana bhakti and bhava bhakti. Sadhana bhakti refers to the development of devotional service through regulative principles. The basic principle for the execution of devotional service is faith. Above that, there is association. After that, there's initiation by a bona fide spiritual master. After initiation, when one follows the regulative principles, one becomes free from all unwanted things. In this way, one becomes firmly fixed and gradually develops a taste for devotional service. The more the taste grows, the more one's desires to render service to the Lord. The more one desires to render service to the Lord. In this way, one becomes attached to a particular mellow, Shanta Dasya Sakya Vatsalya Madhurya. And when you reach the stage of bhava, it's in the stage of bhava that you realize your relationship with Krishna. Shanta Dasya Sakya, parental, which is Vatsalya and Madhurya. And we don't, in our line, Lord Chaitanya didn't come to give Shanta, which is neutrality. But he came to give Krishna consciousness in one of the other four mellows. So in the stage of bhava, you understand your relationship with Krishna. That's why It's explained here. I'll read this again. The more the taste grows, the more one desires to render service. In this way, one becomes attached to a particular mellow, Shantadasya Sakya Vatsala Madhura. As a result of such attachment, bhava develops. So that's, you could say, yeah. As a result of attachment, bhava develops, or you could say it further develops. Bhava Bhakti is a platform of purified goodness. You have sattva gun and you have vishuddha sattva, which is called purified goodness because it means there's no trace of material goodness in it. What to speak of passion or ignorance? It's completely transcendental. By such purified goodness, one's heart melts in devotional service. Bhava Bhakti is the first seed of love of God. This emotional stage is there before one attains pure love. When that emotional stage intensifies, it is called Prema Bhakti, or transcendental love of Godhead. This gradual process is also described in the following two verses, which are found in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So the next two verses is the verse that describes these stages. Everything we've described is in these verses, and you find that in Nectar of Devotion. Ado Shraddha Tadusam Tata Sadhusanga. Tata Bhajana Kriya, like that. You should learn that verse. You'll find it in Nectar of Devotion, but if you want to learn it, it's in Madhya Lila, verses 14, and Madhya Lila 20, chapter 23, verses 14 and 15. You can learn this verse. So I just want to go over what we've been reading a little more. The more the taste grows, the more one desires to render service. In this way, one becomes attached. So what it's saying here, as far as I can understand, that as I said, I was under the impression that relationship develops, your relationship is revealed on the stage of bhava. Here, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying it develops on the stage of rati and then it further enhances bhava. So in the stage of, asakti, I'll read that again. The more the taste grows, the more one desires to render service. In this way one becomes attached. Attached is asakti. One becomes attached to a particular mellow. So asakti means attachment to serving Krishna in a particular way. And then Bhava Bhakti is the platform of purified goodness. In this way one becomes attached to a particular mellow. By such purified goodness, bhava, one's heart melts in devotional service. And so the relationship, when you awaken or realize your relationship in the stage of asakti, then when you come to bhava, then it's further intensified or developed. Yeah. You follow? Then you come to bhava, and that's when the emotion comes, because it's become intensified. So if you intensify attachment, then the heart starts to mellow, because the relationship is manifest. And you could imagine if your relationship with Krishna is manifesting, how you would feel. Just like materially, when you develop a relationship with a person, it's a very special feeling. And it can become very intense, as between man and woman. Feelings can become very intense, right? So, yeah. So just imagine with Krishna how intense that would be. I don't think we can imagine, but we can try to imagine. I mean, we can. Now, obviously we can't experience that, but occasionally Krishna will give us a taste. The Shastra, the Nectar Devotion, Chaitanya Charitamrita, it describes the qualities of Krishna. What his personality is like, what his beauty is like, how he's humorous, artistic, good dancer, good musician, like that. And if you How do you become attracted to people? You become attracted to people by their qualities. So as we hear about Krishna's qualities, theoretically we should become more attracted because he has all these wonderful qualities that nobody has. And one thing that I like to observe is that if I see someone with qualities, I think it's just borrowed from Krishna. So how wonderful is Krishna? Somebody's funny. Krishna is the most humorous. Someone is artistic, he's the most artistic. Someone is beautiful, he's the most beautiful. Someone is a great musician, he's the greatest. So, can you imagine what it's like to be with Krishna, who embodies anything great you've ever seen, but more intensely than anyone? Anything that's attractive in this world to us, any person or anything, that's coming from Krishna. So then it's embodied within Krishna. Could you imagine the intensity of that attraction? I don't think you can. But you just get an idea, right? Okay, Sita Leela has a question. What stage of bhakti should that be considered? Oh, wait. Someone may have a lot of taste for hearing Bhagavatam, but no taste for other forms of bhakti. What stage of bhakti should that be considered? It's a difficult question to answer. What can one do to develop a taste for other forms? Sometimes one may not have so much of a taste for other forms due to their nature. So you'd have to look at it in terms of individuals, I would say. But then I would question, why does someone have a taste? Is it just intellectual? Are they getting intellectual stimulation, or they actually have a taste because of their attraction to Krishna? Because sometimes people are very philosophical, and so they have a taste because it's kind of natural for them. They like philosophy. Even sometimes people have a taste because they're a bit lazy. They like intellectual stimulation, and they actually don't like doing so many practical things in Krishna consciousness. So that could be a reason. So obviously that's not due to purity. But if it's due to attachment, then generally one aspect of devotional service could be stronger. But it's hard to imagine that the others wouldn't be there at all, because Krishna is all attractive. So if you're actually attracted to Krishna, you may be more attracted to hearing, but you would still be attracted to chanting. Don't you think? I mean, if you love somebody, you want to talk about them, don't you? Maybe you want to hear about them more, but you would also talk. So I think the point is that the hearing may be predominant for a particular person because of their nature. It's not that they wouldn't. It's not that someone is mature in devotional service and therefore they're always hearing, but they're always speaking nonsense. Doesn't work that way. Because Satatam Kirtantam Mam Mahatmanastu Mam Varta Daivim Pakati Mashrita. The Mahatmas, what do? They're always talking about Krishna. Yeah, that's what Prabhupada told me when I was initiated. The Mahatmas, one was always glorifying Krishna. What can we do to develop a taste for other forms of bhakti? One way is engage in them. The other way is become advanced by doing some of them, and the other ones will manifest. But everyone has their, nature. So it may not be your nature that you're going to want to learn 1,000 shlokas. That's fine. But if you're advancing in devotional service, you will be attracted to other aspects of devotional service. It'll come naturally. If your question is, what if it's not coming now and I want to develop it, then you have to practice it. And you also have to understand it. Like, why should I do it? What's the benefit? How it's done. Like, we're going to do a workshop on prayer next month. So really get into understanding why we should pray and how to do it and what to pray for and what not to pray for. So maybe I don't pray enough, but perhaps after the workshop, understanding the position of prayer in Krishna consciousness, I'll start to pray more because I realize the importance of it. So sometimes you don't realize the importance, and sometimes you're not doing it. And a lot of times you don't realize the importance until you do it. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, sometimes you just have to do other forms of devotional service to find that they're attractive. So I just wanted, anyone else want to ask questions, you can. I just kind of wanted to summarize what we've been discussing. This class was entitled, or this series is entitled The Truth About Love. And so we had begun talking about what love is and what love isn't from a material point of view. And we began this class by saying that spiritual love has no personal motive, personal interest, but you can see that in material love, there's a lot of personal interest. Actually, the personal interest is a lot of what fosters or fires that love. And then when those personal interests or needs are not being met, sometimes that fire of love becomes extinguished. Right? So it's a very different kind of love. And then here, very different from Krishna consciousness. And here, we're looking at the stages of development of love, and we see that love of Krishna, it only happens when there's absolute purification. So after anartha nivritti comes nishta. Nishta, this is how they count in India. Nishta, and then you have ruchi, asakti, and bhava, and prema. So that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you want to read my palm, you can also do that. Take a picture of it. Yeah. The palm readers out there. Yeah. I can read my palm and I don't even know how to read it. You know? Like some people do your astrology and after they do it, they said, I already knew that. So, 5 stages after Nishta, where there's freedom of material desire, you develop love of Godhead. And each stage is a stage of higher levels of purity. And the more the impurities are removed, if you look at it like, let's say, a magnet that's covered, and so its attractive force is not strong. And as you remove coverings, or like a mirror that's covered, or clouds in the sky. So what's happening is that the soul is naturally attracted to Krishna, but it's covered. So each stage is an uncovering. And as you uncover more and more, natural attraction for Krishna awakens. And so when it's completely uncovered, in the purest state, and love of Krishna awakens. So that way, you can see how love of Krishna, it's a completely different category. And also because it's for Krishna, it's transcendental, because Krishna is transcendental. Right? So again, we go back to this point where Prabhupada said there's no love in the material world, which is often difficult to understand because we see love, we see affection, we see dedication, we see sacrifice. But Prabhupada's comparing it to prema. That love does not exist in the world because the level of sacrifice and dedication that a devotee has for Krishna is impossible for ordinary people to have. In ordinary relationships, it just won't go that far. At least symptomatically you won't develop that level of devotion, and the symptoms of that love will not be the same. Is that okay? Do I have your permission to end? We have gone 1 hour. So, great sages and saints, do you have any other questions? We had talked earlier, it's like everything has its material side and its spiritual side. So if you say there's no love, just like Prabhupada said, if you're not Krishna conscious, you don't have any good qualities. Well, what does that mean? Because we see people have good qualities. It means that those qualities are not engaged in Krishna service. The good qualities are utilized for their own personal sense gratification. So you'll see it externally and it looks like a good quality. But then you realize what Shastra is saying is not a good quality because it's not used for Krishna. Or it's not in relation to Krishna. It's not, that quality is not connected to Krishna. Like I could be humble. It's a good quality. Why I'm humble? Because I'm not humble to my boss, I don't get a paycheck. So I'm manifesting humility, but the reason I'm humble is not because I know God is great and I'm small, is that I know my boss won't like me if I'm not humble. So you see humility, but it's not actually humility in its full form. So you see the love of a mother, or the love of lovers, or the love of brothers, and so on. And it's, it can be very deep, but nothing like love for Krishna, which causes a devotee to faint in separation, and cause devotees to go crazy, and just that's all they think about. There's no attachment to anything else. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, this is a very interesting topic. What love is. I mean, knowing what it is, you can know that you don't have it. And then you can get worried now. Now that you've heard this, you can all, after class, just stay up at night and worry. I don't have love of Krishna, what am I going to do? But that's, in a sense, good. We should worry about it because it is life's ultimate goal. And knowing the stages, we can start to monitor, well, what stage am I at? And we can celebrate as we go to higher stages. And through executing sadhana bhakti well, you'll come to anartha nivritti. And as you go each stage up, Krishna consciousness gets easier. In the middle stages, it's not so easy because you're fighting material desire. But when you get purified of material desire, then you don't have to fight it anymore. So then it becomes easier. You're not dealing with anger. You're not dealing with resentment. You're not dealing with pride. You're not dealing with a need to control. You're not dealing with intolerance. You're dealing more with attachment to Krishna, attachment to his devotees. You're dealing more with the natural characteristics of the soul. Humility arises. Tolerance arises. Equanimity, peace of mind, all these things arise. So, yes, that's the idea. So it becomes easier. So even if it's difficult now, just know that it becomes easier as you elevate yourself. And if you don't get through this stage, it's like kind of a self-torture. You'll never ultimately be. If you're in Krishna consciousness and you're trying to make yourself happy materially, it never works, because we only become happy when we become detached and purified. Now, if we're trying to make ourselves happy materially in order that we can become more stable in Krishna consciousness, that's different, because I need certain things for my physical comfort, let's say, or for my peace of mind. Once I have those, then I can peacefully engage in devotional service. So that's okay, that's fine. You're just dealing with where you're at. But if it's just pure gratification of your senses, it just becomes an obstacle, because the symptom of advancing in Krishna consciousness is that you won't have these attachments. And if you exploit these attachments or indulge in these attachments, then it just makes it difficult to become Krishna conscious. It's like you're taking a step back. You've taken a few steps forward, then you've taken a step back, or you just bathed and rolled in the dirt. So we're trying to get through this process, and the faster we get to the stage of anartha nivritti and nishta, the better. Then it'll start to become easy. So that's a good point to meditate on. Okay? So I can end here. We can hit the off button and say goodbye till next week. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Jai Prabhupada. Oh, it won't even let me turn it off. Amazing. My phone's not cooperating, so looks like the broadcast is going to go on forever. Please stop your broadcast. Yeah, my phone stopped working. The buttons are not. They're not happy. They're not working. And if they don't work, what it means is I can't save it because I have to turn my phone on. I didn't save last week's, although I recorded it audio. That's such a problem. Oh my God. Too bad we won't be able to save it. Chat button works. Ganesha says we will be here forever. Yeah, my album Forever.